Good afternoon. I would like to welcome all of you on behalf of the Polish Institute of International Affairs Brussels office to this Polish-Slovenian strategic dialogue. I welcome especially our honorable panelists from both countries, our dear moderator, Mr. Ambassador Marian Šetins, who is the president of Slovenian Association of International Relations, our today's partner, who will present them all the panelists in detail later on. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. I must admit that I'm particularly grateful to our Slovenian co-organizer. I'm very glad that we have managed together to galvanize our prominent experts on international relations to debate about this major current theme for the European Union, which is our strategic choices in the context of global power rivalry. And also within such a good timing, just before the Slovenian presidency of the Council of the European Union, which will kick off in 1 month and a half. And I think this is extremely important to present the perspectives on the EU major agenda from our region, still not very present at the Brussels level, Central, Northern, and Southern Europe. And peace is particularly active in this regard. We have organized already various debates with our partners from the Baltic states, V4 countries, and others, like Austria recently. But I'm especially glad that we will discuss today how Western Balkans accession to the European Union is important priority of Slovenia's presidency. I think that one of the most urgent goals that are ahead of the EU is namely reinvigorating our neighborhood policies. This is a capital question in my view, in which extent we would prove that our political, our economical model is or should be attractive to other states, yet outside the bloc. This is our first co-branded event, and I'm strongly convinced that there should be much more Polish-Slovenian strategic discussions. So I count on the follow-ups. And before giving the floor to Mr. Ambassador Šetins, one final technical remark to our public, which I welcome also very warmly. We count on your participation in our debate. So our moderator will pick up your questions so you can start posting them in the chat, even from now on. I wish you all a fascinating discussion. Mr. Ambassador, the screen is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Juchishin. Thank you for your kind words. This is the first meeting organized between our two organizations. If it was not for COVID, we would still hesitate how to meet physically, either in Ljubljana or Warsaw. Zoom has come handy, replacing live meetings, but cannot replace live contacts. Soon on arrival to Slovenia, Ambassador Olensky, Ambassador of Poland to Slovenia, and myself met and discussed various topics concerning Polish-Slovenian relations. During discussion, the idea to bring together Polish and Slovenian analysts to discuss EU's global role popped out. So here we are today. Pism and SDMO. Of course, in English, it sounds different. I propose we start our debate as we agreed. Debate will be divided into two parts along the lines indicated on the invitation. First part devoted to global positioning of the EU, and second part to enlargement and a wider union, and then followed by questions from the audience. So let me just say a few introductory sentences before we I invite the two panelists for the first part of the block of the debate. Public debate on the future of Europe has officially taken off on Sunday, the 9th May 2021. This is the Liberation Day of Europe, basically. Europe is facing, obviously, many challenges, internally as well as externally. EU citizens are invited to contribute to the direction EU should take in the future. It looks like citizens are called to rescue or save Europe. Our today's discussion, as indicated in the title, The EU in the Changing World, may be a small contribution to the future of Europe debate. There is little doubt that we are witnessing an incredibly dynamic, vigorous global situation, probably instigated by the realization on both sides of the Atlantic that economic, military, and technological rise of China is a threat to Euro-Atlantic dominance. There are presently three economies, China, USA, and EU, which make up for 50%, precisely 49.56% of the world's GDP in terms of purchasing power parity. This is the latest World Bank estimate. Brexit pushed European Union behind the US in GDP terms. China has far the biggest GDP in purchasing power parity. It's exceeding 26,000 billion US dollars. United States is around 23 billion and the EU 21 billion. But it is not just for the GDP. The military and defense expenditure of China in 1999 were just 6.7% of America's military spending. And 20 years later, it grew already to 35.7% of American military and defense spending, which runs at 732 billion US dollars, as we know. And EU cumulative military and defense expenditure reached in 2019 208 billion US dollars, or 28.4% of the US military budget. But let's go further. The 1st of May issue of The Economist cover story has the title, "The Most Dangerous Place in the World," describing the intriguing Taiwan situation, which, as you probably noticed, stirred strong reaction in China, but also in Taiwan. 2 days later, the Chinese Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs warned the US against playing the Taiwan card. He also implied that China is open to resorting military force. Interestingly, Henry Kissinger, we all know him, just a few days earlier spoke at Chatham House and saying the following, in inverted commas, the United States will have to reach an understanding with China on a new global order to ensure stability, or the world will face a dangerous period like the one which preceded World War I, and warned of the disaster for the world in case of two greatest technological military powers clash. And then I happened to watch Euronews on the 4th of May. In fact, no, I should take a sentence back. At the policy exchange, I watched that on the internet. The keynote address on India and the United Kingdom in a post-COVID world, the Indian foreign minister was asked a question: who would India side with if the conflict arises with Taiwan? The minister simply answered, as a politician, I can't answer a hypothetical question. But a European citizen is wondering, where should EU stand in this confrontation? What position would EU be taking? Maybe the European political analysts are already challenging this question. Of course, the analysts have no privilege not to challenge hypothetical questions. When we talk about EU's place globally, how to maintain its position in the future, we are inevitably faced with challenging questions like, where do we belong? What strategic moves should EU do? Where should EU focus its political influence? Are the present EU policies the right policies concerning, for example, Turkey, Iran, China, Russia, Africa? The economic and political situation in the world is quickly changing. Where is EU today in facing the rise of China and America's intention to retain her global dominance? Can United States compete with China without Europe and vice versa? Are global challenges forcing EU into more economic and political cohesion and acting together? These are just a few among many questions we Europeans are asking ourselves. It's time that I pass the microphone to our first two speakers, panelists, who will kick off today's debate. Mirko Ziegler is, I would say, very outspoken analyst and commentator on global affairs and geopolitics, not only in Slovenia, but also invited beyond Slovenian borders. And Dr. Marta Špala, a senior researcher, fellow at the Center for Eastern Studies in Warsaw. Very fine institution. I have been there, and I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Špala. So first, I would say, Mr. Ziegler, the word is yours. Microphone.
Thank you, Marian. Greetings from Ljubljana to everybody. Now, yesterday, when I was preparing for this conference, I spinned John Lennon's Imagine after I don't know how long time ago. And some lyrics really catched my attention. He sings these lines: how can we go forward if we don't know where we stand? And suddenly I realized that I finally got the title for my today introductory presentation regarding the EU and the changing world. Definitely, it should be changing EU in the changing world, because when we just think about when French President Macron widely published his proposal for Europe Renaissance in March 2019, it was like very long time ago, not just 2 years. It was a kind of, for today perspective, a kind Le Monde Perdu. Situation was quite different. And then when half a year later, both Franco-German non-paper appeared in November 19, shaping more precisely how this debate should be carried out. It took another, half a year, up to June 20, that the Council of the European Union decided for this conference. And actually, nearly a year to really start it last weekend. We heard from the European leaders and participants at the inauguration meeting what are expectations from this conference, and they are very high, very big, very ambitious, very optimistic, and I think very wrong. Because in order to be able to really define in such a most broad terms and participation the future of Europe, the environment for this debate should be different from the one in which we are right now. Pandemic is not a positive environment for such attempt. Pandemic, the historians who studied it profoundly, like Frank Snowden or Ian King, are warning us that pandemic is somehow bringing in people more negative than positive energy, more negative thinking than positive thinking. Indeed, as Frank Snowden would say, it is a mirror to human, where we can see all our big problems, and Young King is pointing out that the changes which pandemics have been doing throughout the human history are pretty much similar to the big wars. So it is about the fundamental changes. They are changing elites, both political and economic elites. They are changing lifestyles. They are changing culture. They are changing the way how the wars were waged. So very profound changes. Is this really the circumstances when we would be able to bring these new ideas about the Europe? So before we start talking about the change in the world, we need first to see and to try to see as realistic as possible what is the change first inside ourselves, inside European Union, and then inside the world. Now, when we are talking about changes inside European Union, first of all, we need to focus or to stay on political change. And just recently, both Freedom House of United States and VDEM Institute, which is in Europe covering the broadest, in broadest terms, democracy, came out with shocking conclusions. Our European Institute put it very bluntly, and I quote, "Democracy today is on the level of the 90s." Or in a report for 2020, they said that autocratization is in viral terms. And at the same time, American Freedom House is estimated that coronavirus outbreak presents a range of new challenges to democracy and human rights. With the rise of repressive regimes using pandemic as an excuse to actually to strengthen their governing way and actually threaten freedoms, human rights, and open society as such. So these are very important, I would say, starting blocks because of we can't really talk about the future if we are back to the past, right? So if the European countries, and sadly in the VDIM report, my own country, but also Poland, are in the group of countries which are not considered democratic, liberal democratic countries anymore. They invented the new term. They called us electoral democracy. In US, they called us backsliding democracy. Well, we are still better than those of European countries which got the level of electoral autocracies. So this is political realities where we are right now in Europe. And before or when we would talk about our future, we would need very realistically to look where we are today. Secondly, on structures. On European Union structures, first, of course, we need to look both extremes. In one way, European Union is shrinking, and another way, the process of enlargement has lost its impetus for quite some time. How we can get back to a kind of attractiveness to the Union, which would bring for countries who are still interested to join in us the new energy and the new enthusiasm to join. Second, of course, in structural terms, is question of governance, participation, balance of power. Somehow we try to be, we are somehow romantic about the balance of power and participation in European Union. It took a year that we actually kick off this conference because, be honestly, European Parliament, European Commission, and European Council were not able to agree how to share the power among themselves, even during preparation and the run of the conference, not about the outcome of it. And on this, on top of this, we need to add the member states. They all, each of them has their own view on this issue. And in addition, national parliaments would also have the equal say. So a year from now, when during French presidency, the conference ought to finish, and it is doomed to finish as a success, because otherwise it would be the fatal, devastating for French president going to next election. So regardless of big rhetorics, which we heard last week at the opening, and declarations of the presidents of European countries, etc. The broadest possible participation of European citizens in these discussions, like our conference today, and many, many similar and others, at the end, the outcome would again be the minimum common denominator of all these major actors and decision makers. So that's why I say it's so important that we start these deliberations with as realistic approach as possible, because only in this way I am very convinced that we would be able to come to certain positive conclusions. And finally, outside dimension of European Union. For some time now, we are listening again and again about geopolitical Europe, strategic autonomy. But when we are looking at the great picture of the world today, we are not really see Europe as such. First of all, pandemics, which would be, or which was, an excellent opportunity where the Europe would be able to show itself that it's really a geopolitical leader of the world, if you will, was not used to this. On contrary, in the first phase, we saw, well, horrible things. Countries fighting each other for protective gears, stealing from each other, putting all sorts of barriers, etc. Then, instead of being able to design a common policy and strategy how to deal, they turn back to national borders and try to do it on their own, on their best way. And even in this second phase, when you are moving from protective gears to vaccines and medicines, we again were not really able to manage this issue of vaccine as a quote unquote geopolitical weapon. We forgot basically for Africa and the third world, and the little vaccine and medicine and support what they got, they did not get it neither from us nor from United States, but they got it from Russia and they got it from China, of course, with additional price tag, or at least hidden price tag in it. So our assessment of the world, or how we are seen in the world, should be guided by the same realistic drive, a realistic approach as to our own introspective. How we define threats and challenges. What really is the meaning of strategic autonomy? How we deal issues between confrontation versus cooperation? What is the main power behind global player? Is it hard? Is it soft power? How we decide between values and interests? How in this very different world we cooperate with NATO on one side and OSCE on the other? what should be our steps in the first post-pandemic recovery of Union itself, and what would be European place in the geopolitical resilience of the world. So these questions are important, and in order to be able to answer, of course, we would need to put clear priorities for the EU. And of course, the first and the most urgent one is to deal with pandemic, to bring it into a situation that we would be able to live with it as much as possible normally, in all its four main dimensions. So health, economic, social, political, and security. Of course, priorities which we already pointed out before, environment, climate change, resilience. Pandemia showed actually how digitalization, well, our conference today is the example of it, is shaping the world in a very short period of time. Confrontation we are seeing in the world looks like it's on values, not on interests. It's more about human rights, democratization. Migration issue, mobility and demography has not been resolved. How the post-COVID globalization would look like. We are now seeing every day more and more that the global supply chains are getting in very big troubles. Raw materials, industrial parts, chips, copper, crops, etc., are already in the big troubles everywhere. And most probably we will be facing this even more. Finally, what kind of new multilateralism would emerge and for European Union to be part of it? These questions are, of course, important when we are looking from European Union or from Europe to the world, and this world has changed that it's clearly unrecognizable. Immediately after the outbreak of pandemia, Henry Kissinger was already mentioned, but also many other former big shots in international relations, German Foreign Minister Joschka Fischer, Russian Foreign Minister Ivano, and many others actually wrote and pointed out that it's time for a new world order, opening the question whether pandemia itself is enough game changer to initiate such a profound change of the world.
Mirko.
Yes, time. Okay, I will stop here just to finish with the sense that at this point we are not sure where actually we stand in the sense of the global order. We have several ideas, but basically, let's say in one way, Biden and many others believe that with a kind of reformed, new, fresh view on democracy, this would be a possible base for a new world order. And on the other way, there are people who think that the new world order would most probably need to resemble something what was the 19th century status of big powers in Europe, where ideology and political system would not be the prevailing elements, but state power as such for the beginning like this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mirko. I have to step in with a little bit my mistake. I knew that when Dr. Jurčíšin told me that I should allocate different names to different themes, that I'll make a mistake, but it's never too late. I would ask Dr. Štěpánek if would you take the floor and take the freedom of entering this theme we are opening now.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much, Ambassador, and I am delighted to be able to exchange with such a distinguished group of panelists. Mr. Mirko Ziegler started his introduction with a reference to the pandemic, and I would like to treat the pandemic as my point of departure as well. I tend to perceive the pandemic as a catalyst, as an event that provided some additional impetus for important reforms that were being designed already before the pandemic struck. If we look at the EU industrial strategy of 2020, which was presented only a couple of days before lockdowns were introduced in Europe, we can already see a number of important elements that are now the center of attention. In the industrial strategy, the European Commission emphasized that the Union has to become less dependent on imports, especially in strategic domains such as raw materials. The Commission also emphasized that the EU needs to make up for the lost ground in the technological race, and that it needs to become more effective at protecting its economy against competitors who are not always willing to play by the rules. And I believe the pandemic added some urgency to all these tasks. I believe that the EU became more aware of its weaknesses, but also more determined to act, to do something about it. But the pandemic also created circumstances that complicate the achievement of the objectives that I just mentioned. First of all, the Union was hit harder economically than the other two economic powerhouses of the world, namely China and the United States. The major adversaries of the Union are using the pandemic to boost its influence in the world and also to tarnish the image of the Union through disinformation campaigns. China and Russia largely ignored the UN-led efforts to finance research and later production of vaccines in common. Instead, they are selling their own vaccines into individual states, and through this, they attempt to boost their influence in various regions of the world. Finally, and third element, the other states drew similar conclusions from the pandemic. They also want to become less reliant on others. They also want to reshape the international system in a way that serves their interests better. So the Union's ambition to strengthen its autonomy, to become more assertive in world affairs, can put it on collision course with other countries. And here we can look at the example of the carbon border adjustment mechanism. It is a mechanism that the Union wants to use to discourage companies from moving production activities to countries with lax emission standards. But countries such as Brazil, China, India criticize this mechanism and perceive it as a protectionist measure. Despite the challenges, despite the difficulties that I just mentioned, the Union also has a number of assets that can back its aspirations to the leading role in the world. First and foremost, it's the access to the single market. The access to the single market is attractive, and other companies, other countries are willing to accept EU standards in order to gain access to the single market. And if they accept these standards, of course, it gives the edge to European firms again over their competitors. The second asset is the recovery fund. By creating the recovery fund through common debt, the Union proved its resilience, both to the citizens, but also to the outside world. The money from the recovery fund can not only speed up, accelerate the rebound, the economic recovery in the Union, but it can also enable member states to modernize the economies, to make them more productive, but also less harmful for the environment and for the climate. If the European Union manages to reconcile competitiveness and productivity on the one hand with sustainable development, it would be a considerable success, and it would help the Union to convince other countries to follow that route. So what should the European Union do? Well, first of all, it should find the right balance between the drive to strengthen its independence, its self-reliance on the one hand, with the wish to remain an advocate for economic openness and free trade. The EU is a trading power. It draws considerable gains, considerable benefits from flourishing world trade. But it is also clear that in some areas, the Union needs to depend less on others, especially if these others are called systemic rivals. And I believe the Commission drew the right conclusion by carrying out an audit of EU dependencies and pinpointing some areas that need attention. Secondly, the EU can draw benefits from free trade only if the playing field is level. So the Union has to become more effective at protecting its companies, against unfair rivals. And this could be achieved, for example, by the improved mechanism for screening foreign investments, by demanding reciprocity from partners, and also by restricting access to the single market to companies that are either subsidized by states or that do not respect standards regarding environment or labor. Of course, striking this balance between openness and independence, it's not easy. And we can take the recent agreement on investments with China as an example. The agreement creates some additional opportunities for EU companies in China, but critics of the agreements claim that the EU did not manage to get from China some binding commitments regarding climate and regarding labor standards. So the Union has to, it will not be easy, it will take time, it will take a discussion to find the right balance. Secondly, the Union should cooperate with like-minded countries, especially with the United States. Joe Biden's presidency creates an opportunity for improved relations with the United States. We already have a lot of improvement on climate. There is a promising Biden's proposal on taxation, but there are still some areas that need to be settled, especially trade, but also standards regarding the digital sector. But all in all, by coordinating and cooperating with the United States, the Union can be more effective at protecting its interests and at extracting concessions from other powers such as China. And thirdly, I think the Union should strive to use the pandemic as an opportunity to strengthen its credentials as a force for the good in the world. A lot has been achieved, a lot has been done in this respect. The Union invested quite a lot of money in assisting other countries. and in multilateral projects such as COVAX, focus on vaccines. So in order not to waste this potential, the Union should continue in this direction. And in the current circumstances, it means sharing the vaccines with the countries that are not as advanced in their vaccine programs. In the European Union, the vulnerable groups are mostly vaccinated. So I believe that the Union should really start sharing the vaccines quite soon. And this would enable the Union to strengthen its credentials as a power that doesn't only care for itself, but also for others. Just one sentence in conclusion. While the pandemic was clearly a serious economic blow for the Union, I believe it also accelerates certain processes that, if managed properly, could not only strengthen the Union and could strengthen its role in the world. I'll stop my introduction here, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Szczepanik. It's very interesting, a lot of proposals to digest for those who are going to contribute to the conference for the future of Europe. I propose we go to the second block, and we have not decided who is going to speak first, who will lift the hand, who will be speaking first, okay? Okay, Ambassador Kunic. But I would take advantage of being a mediator, that I'll say a few sentences about this, how I think we should be thinking about the Balkans. I will start with the sentence that EU's global impact starts, no doubt, in its neighborhood. The 2003 Thessaloniki summit was a success for EU and encouragement for Western Balkan. But since then, the accession perspective has turned into a moving target, with very hesitant EU side setting accession requirements almost as unachievable hurdle for the Balkan candidate countries. Accession process is further slowed by the neighboring EU countries, which are stepping in with absurd demands, probably encouraged by the change of Macedonia's name achieved by Greece. We saw the EU stepped aside. It has done too little to calm the case. In fact, left the Greek pressure to drag on for years. On May the 1st, President Stevo Panderovski of North Macedonia gave an interview on the Euronews. The sentence, he said, should loudly resonate in the Brussels corridors. He said, delaying opening of the accession negotiations is destabilizing the region. He meant Western Balkans. We may be finding all kinds of counter arguments, but should not keep a blind eye at this statement. Maybe he's right and should be listened. If bilateral conditioning is not banned by any EU treaty, bilateral problems are left to countries involved. There are quite a few unresolved problems between different member states, and life goes on. Oliver Verhelyi, EU Commissioner for Neighbourhood and Enlargement, passed a few days ago the idea to decouple Albania and North Macedonia in the accession process. I think this makes President Panderovsky's worry very real. Uncertainty of the accession process is opening these countries to other influences and partnerships. China and Russia do not hesitate to fill the gap. China with projects and investments, and Russia through its historic ties. But it's not only Russia and China, also Turkey. The rich Gulf countries are here, especially in parts of the Western Balkans with predominant Muslim populations. However, not everything is so bleak. The enlargement fatigue, true, the enlargement fatigue within the EU has been delaying the accession process, but has against all odds produced some positive developments. Just to mention a few. Well, in 2008, under the Slovenian presidency succeeded in a breakthrough with visa liberalization for all non-EU Balkan countries. Slovenia was also strongly supportive of Western Balkan transport community. Next is so-called mini Schengen. The deal was signed during an online meeting of Serbia, Albania, and North Macedonia last year. Serbian President Vučić and Albanian Prime Minister Edi Rama have signed a deal on November 9th, 2020, which will let citizens of both countries travel to and from the other without the need for a passport. Is there a middle way for these countries? In early 2020, European Stability Initiative published a report on the crisis of the EU accession process in the Balkans. They argued that the EU has a strong political and economic incentive to offer to any interested Western Balkan nation the chance to join its single market as an interim goal in a reformed two-stage EU accession process. And that there was a precedent for this, the Finnish road to accession. But I would ask the question, is the proposal realistic, or is it further delaying the accession, or delaying it to endless accession process? Is Western Balkan in a strategic focus of the EU? I think it should be. It has for long, from the 60s, some of us can well remember, of the last century, been a cheap labor mine for Europe. They were, and still are, a valuable workforce which has been for long contributing to the economy of the EU. Involvement of EU in all Western Balkan candidate countries is no doubt quite substantial. Should it be stronger, especially in investments which would create jobs and offer perspective to young and skilled people? Should EU accelerate the accession process? Should speed up negotiations? But more importantly, would the accession process diminish the conflicting situations based on national divisions? There are many open questions. I indicated only a few. So the next two speakers, panelists, Ambassador Dr. Kunic and Dr. Špala, the word is yours. And since Ambassador Kunic opted to speak first, please, Ambassador Kunic.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor and pleasure to have the opportunity to be among the panelists at this important event. European Union was always perceived as the group of nations with the same status, They were and still are equally represented in the Council. Each member state has its commissioner and has the relative number of their members of the EU Parliament. De facto, the conditions of stable and effective EU are well-defined and preservable balance of power among the member states is formally guaranteed. We are talking about one-speed EU. There were some examples of trying to establish a separate bloc of the EU states, sometimes with the support of some foreign country. This would lead the European construction straight toward disintegration, as some could also take advantage of it. China promoted the idea of creating alliance 16+1. States of Central and Eastern Europe would strengthen economic links with China. Later, this group evolved in 17+1, joining Greece in 2019. Although the initiative 17+1 initially had some successful projects, EU succeeded to somehow moderate Chinese influence on the EU unity. The 3Cs initiative is a forum of 12 states in the European Union among a north-south axis from the Baltic Sea to the Adriatic and Black Sea in Central and Eastern Europe. This initiative is supported by the USA. The initiative is focusing on funding the cross-border infrastructure projects. We cannot exclude the possibility that behind the idea of creating this initiative, there is the idea of creating a separate bloc of Eastern members of the EU, creating the tampon zone between the western part of the EU and Russian Federation. The Visegrad Group is a cultural and political alliance of 4 countries, all of which are members of the EU and NATO, and advanced cooperation in military, cultural, economic, and energy matters with one another. It is evident that under the presidency of Mr. Trump, the Visegrad Group was supported by the USA. The visit of Mr. Pompeo, State Secretary, just confirmed it. Traditionally, the United Kingdom played the role of the European balancer, but they opted to leave the EU. The only countries which have the ability to be the balancer are Germany and France. At this moment, they seem to try to play this role, but yet they haven't been very successful. If the EU Parliament, together with some important and economically strong members, is not successful in balancing the CEE countries, the way toward the double-speed EU may be opened. After the elections in the USA, where Mr. Trump was replaced by Mr. Joe Biden, we can expect that the policy of diminishing the power of the EU will probably be changed. We cannot be sure, but it seems that the way toward the split between Eastern and Central Europe will no more be widely open. European perspective for the Western Balkans will be among the priorities during Slovenia's presidency of the EU Council in the second half of this year. Slovenia is among the main initiators of constructive discussion regarding the future of EU enlargement policy. Yearly multilateral meeting of the leaders of Western Balkans countries is called Brdo Brioni process, which was established by the President of Slovenia, Borut Pahor, and the President of Croatia, Ivo Josipovic. It is important that in this month, shortly before Slovenian EU Council presidency, the Brdo Brioni meeting will be realized. Let me mention that the Brdo-Brioni process inspired the creation of the Berlin process. Now the countries of the Western Balkans do not expect to become the members of the EU in visible future, although they would like it. And the need of the regional cooperation resulted in the creation of some alliances in this region. Serbia President Aleksandar Vučić, Prime Minister of Northern Macedonia Zoran Zaev, and Prime Minister of Albania Edi Rama signed on October 9, 2019 in Novi Sad a joint declaration of intent to establish a mini Schengen among the three states. They signed declaration, and this declaration should help the Western Balkans region to start functioning on the basis of four key freedoms on which the European Union is founded: freedom of movement of people, capital, goods, and services. It was stressed that the respective initiative is not a compensation or alternative to the membership of the countries in the region in the EU, but in fact, it replaces some advantages of freedoms which enjoy the EU members. De facto, this initiative is a compensation for the EU membership. Is the EU going towards one-speed European Union or towards double-speed EU? It seems that there are some world superpowers interested in the creating double-speed EU with two blocks of countries with the possibility of mounting tensions between them. Yet, EU has always been able to surpass such for the unity dangerous ideas, and especially after the UK decision to leave the EU, the idea of one-speed EU is strong and stable, and it is very active. Although the position against the double-speed EU is supported by important European forces, and also by many EU citizens, we cannot neglect the possibility that the EU becomes the double-speed EU. Let us hope that the Conference on the Future of the EU will diminish such a possibility. The Western Balkans countries strive to enter the EU, but the EU with the democratic values following the ideas of the founding fathers. If the EU becomes a double-speed EU, the Western Balkans countries would enter into the eastern part of the EU, a very different alliance with more autocratic values, with less respect of human rights and less freedom of media, not respecting the rule of law and independent judiciary. Is there still any sense to enter such an alliance? I think that the double-speed EU is not a good option, neither for the EU nor for the entire world. We should preserve the united EU and do our best that it becomes politically stronger and economically more successful. Thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you, Ambassador Kunic. Well, we should proceed straight away. Dr. Špala, the word is yours. I'm sure we will run out of time, but you have time.
Yeah, so thank you very much once again for the invitation. And as you mentioned, the Bruni process, it's also worth to remember that our president, Andrzej Duda, was the honorary guest of the previous summit, which was in Tirana in 2019. And it was also the proof of our commitment to the Western Balkans, and also a good start for cooperation with Slovenia on the policy towards the Western Balkans. And let me start with presenting you the Polish perspective on EU enlargement policy. Poland is really active in the field of Western Balkans, but I think it's not so well known, like this issue is not so well known. So first of all, the Poland is rare. I think it's not so many countries as Poland in the European Union, where the support of for the Euro enlargement is the subject of consensus between the political elites and the society. So all major political parties in Poland support the enlargement, and I think this is really important. And it's not the question, it's not the subject of the political debate. Like all leaders agree on that it is the strategic objective of European Union, and I think it's very important. And also, which is also not so popular in the European Union, society vastly support the membership of Western Balkan countries in the European Union. So according to the latest poll, almost 70% of the population support EU enlargement. I think it is one of the highest number in Poland. Only 20% is against. So I think it's also a really good indicator and really good base for active Polish policy towards the region. And why the support is so vast and profound. First of all, of course, Poland has a really positive experience. Let's say first-hand experience with positive aspects of positive consequence of EU membership. And it is like we in Poland, we used to say that, you know, in 1989, the per capita GDP of Poland and Ukraine was on the same level. And now after 30 years, we can see where is Poland now in terms of GDP and where is Ukraine. And also really good proof that the enlargement policy, it's really effective a tool to change the neighborhood. And I think it is like all political elite in Poland believe that enlargement is one of the most successful instrument of EU policy. And also that is why the support for enlargement is so high. Of course, the enlargement policy is also important for us from the geopolitical perspective. We don't want to create power vacuum in the Balkans, which, as it was mentioned here a couple of times before, this vacuum can be used by the third actors to create their sphere of influence. So we think that from this perspective, it's really important to finish unification of Europe and also put the Western Balkans inside the European Union. The third thing is, and I think it's also not the fact which is not so well known, it's really strong people-to-people contacts between Poland and the Western Balkans. We have really huge number of tourists from Poland going to Balkans. In case of Albania, is the highest number. The highest number of foreign tourists is coming from Poland. We have the direct flight connection with almost all capital city in the Western Balkans, except for Sarajevo and Pristina. And, you know, it is operating on really daily basis. In case of Skopje, it's 6 flights per week. And it's not diaspora flights, which is usually the case with the Balkans, but it is, you know, tourists, people who are interested in the region, and this cultural ties, interest in culture, music, books from the region. It's really high in Poland, and it is really visible. Let me say, oh, this is like personal note that Dubioza Collective, the really popular band from Sarajevo, is playing in Warsaw almost like two times a year, and I wasn't able to buy the tickets because they are usually sold out in an hour. So this also shows how Polish society is interested in the Western Balkans. And of course, it's not only that we are supporting the enlargement policy, but we also have some specific tools, and we were really active on this field. So of course, Polish policy towards the region is usually overshadowed by our ties with the Eastern partnership, but I also think that our engagement in the region shouldn't be neglected or underestimated. So first of all, we were really active during the 90s in stabilization mission, both of EU, UN and NATO in the region. We were, like, our soldiers were present in all missions in Albania, Macedonia, Bosnia and Kosovo. We still have huge contingent in Kosovo and Bosnia, and also we are active in ULEX mission and Polish mission in Bosnia, and we think that like this mission should stay stay there. We have also some specific Polish tools which are aimed at supporting the reform process in the Western Balkans. So we have Enlargement Academy, which is the exchange program for civil servants from the Western Balkans. We have also the Tirana, Skopje, and Belgrade conference, which is the exchange of, or it is the conference which is organized on a yearly basis between experts from Polish ministries to its counterparts from the different countries in the region, and it's also mainly aimed at exchanging our experience from the negotiation process, and it is and support the reform in the region. We have also a program which I am especially proud of. It's Remembrance, Understanding and Future, and it is devoted to reconciliation. So this is the model which is aimed at exchanging Polish experience with reconciliation with Germany. And the participants are coming from Western Balkans and Poland and Germany, and we together discuss the challenges in the reconciliation process in both regions. And I think it's also very useful both for us and also for the Western Balkan countries. And of course, our activities in the Western Balkans were enhanced during our presidency in the Berlin process and preparation period for the summit, for the Western Balkan summit, which took place in Poznan in 2011. So we organized a lot of exchange, study visit for the business people, for experts, for journalists, to get known region better. So I think, like, Poland is really active on this Western Balkans in the Western Balkans policy, and we are also worried when we are observing the trends in both in the region but also in EU policy towards Western Balkans. So first of all, and I think it is obvious that the credibility of the membership perspective in the past few years has been undermined, and not so many people in the region, and especially among the political elites in the Western Balkans, believes that the membership can be achieved in the foreseeable future. The second thing is that the EU is really is less keen on pursuing the ambition policy towards the region. And when we compare the Zagreb Declaration from 2000 and from 2020, from last year, we can see how it has been changed. So in 2000 we were really able to offer the membership perspective for the region, and the declaration from the past year, the membership wasn't mentioned at all. So our ambitions are diminished, and I think it is a serious problem. And of course, what we also talk about it here, that this lack of active policy in the region enable other players like Russia or China to enhance its position in the region. And we can also like remember that in 2003 Russia withdrew from Kosovo, and you know actually admit that it is the sphere of this is the sphere of EU influence. Either EU membership or NATO membership of the Western Balkans countries wasn't challenged by Russia, and now it is the case. Like Russia is challenging both the EU and NATO ambition of the countries in the region, and it also has changed. The problems are, of course, on the both sides. That the reform process in the Western Balkan not only slowed down, but in some cases also the reforms were reversed, and it is a huge challenge. And the elites in the region, they doesn't have any motivation to proceed with the reform, because they don't see this membership perspective as real. So that's why they prefer to build this autocratic, let's say, system of the governments, which is especially visible in case of Albania or in Serbia. And many countries in the EU, like observing these challenges in the region and the slow piece of reform process, decided to give up on the membership. But I think that it's not the solution is not less Europe, but more Europe. And I would like to quote our Prime Minister, which in Sofia during the summit, the Western Balkan EU summit, said that advantages of the Western Balkan accession to the EU far outweigh the risk. And it is, in my opinion, a really good assessment that the risks connected to leaving the Western Balkans outside the European Union are really bigger for us than letting them in. Let's put it that way. And I think that many is the common position of many experts here in Poland, that the geopolitical commission, which was also mentioned here a couple of times, really starts in the Western Balkans. So if the EU really wants to be active international player, it has to prove that it is able to stabilize its neighborhood. And if European Union wants to be a partner of the US in shaping the global order, the Western Balkans should be part of the EU, and and we should like finish this process of stabilization. And like how to achieve that. And I think that this is also, we can also go back to the non-papers which were initiated by Poland in 2018 when the enlargement was blocked by France. That first of all, we should rebuild the credibility of enlargement perspective, and this is the thing we should do during this conference for Europe, that this perspective should be rebuilt. The second thing is that we should impose strict and fair conditionality, but with the goals which can be achieved by the candidate countries. So we shouldn't treat the conditionality as something which is the excuse for us not to proceed with enlargement. The third thing that we really should use the energy of the societies in the Western Balkans, which are vast supporter of EU membership, in contrary to the elite. So we can say that the support of membership, despite disappointment, are really high. In case of Albania, it's 80%. In case of Kosovo, it's similar. So societies really support membership, and we should really work more in the civil society organization, but also on the ground. to go outside this outside this usual talks to the elites. And the third thing is we should also change the communication strategy, communication about the EU enlargement, because the Western Balkans are not a problem, but they are part of solution of some of our problem, especially in case of migration, energy policy, fighting with organized crime and stuff like that. So we should really think how to include them to solving this problem, not to treat them as a challenge as such. And for the practical thing, what can be done in the foreseeable future, especially during the Slovenian presidency, and I think it's quite obvious for all of us, we should open the negotiation with Albania and North Macedonia, and not to let the process to be once again hijacked by some bilateral dispute, because it is damaging the credibility. And the second thing is to grant the Kosovo visa-free regime, because all these three countries fulfill the condition we put back 5 years ago, and now it's our turn to deliver and to open negotiation and proceed with the visa liberalization for Kosovo. And I hope the Slovenian presidency will be able to proceed with these three issues. So thank you very much.
Thank you. That was a very, very substantial what you were ending your contribution, and basically answer to the questions put forward by PISM, namely, question from the public: is enlargement in the strategic interest of the EU? It's clear that if Western Balkans is part of a solution, then it's inevitably in the strategic interest. And of course, it's obviously in the interest of the general population in the EU, but why politics is blocking this? We haven't got an answer to this. So there are quite a few challenges in this, and because we are running out of our time, we should have extended our initial timeline for 1 hour instead of 1 to 1.5 or half an hour. But I had Dr. Štěpánek mentioned something talking about protectionism. This is this has always had is a stick with two ends. Protectionism can be a problem. I would dare to claim that EU has to keep open mind, open to progress, technology, not to ban, not to protect something what EU is behind and cannot catch up with, for example, 5G or something like that. I'm just pointing this, maybe there are other discussions going on, but I'm talking in general terms. So obviously, I understand that there are questions among us, and we have 4 minutes. I can take advantage of these 4 minutes talking myself. And this is what I'm going to do.
We can extend, you know, we can extend, I think, 5 minutes more. our provisional time, so we can open a small discussion, in my view. Yeah.
Okay, I would like ask you for your comments to what we were talking now. Has anyone from the panel have any comment? Ambassador Kunic, what can you comment the position of Slovenia on the accession of the Western Balkans in the EU?
Thank you. Thank you. The position of Slovenia is very clear. We are in favor of enlargement of the European Union towards Western Balkans, but there are some problems, definitely. We didn't mention the main problem of the Western Balkans, which is the Bosnia and Herzegovina problem, where there are serious problems because of when the war finished by the so-called Dayton Agreement, which established some order there, but it is not well functioning. So there is not enough democracy, not enough freedom, and the economy doesn't work well. So, and the tensions between ethnic groups are not resolved. And this is a main problem, and there are different opinions across the European Union, but the basic idea, or I think the basic thing which we should stick to, is that the state borders of Bosnia and Herzegovina are not changed. And the second one, that the internal order should be somehow resolved, but by themselves. European Union could help them. And when this problem is solved, then the entry of Western Balkan countries will be much easier, because this problem influences on Croatia, on Serbia, on Montenegro, on Kosovo, and this is a serious problem. We shouldn't forget that some foreign countries like Russia, like Turkey, like some other countries, try to influence this critical point of the Western Balkans in favor of their interests. And here, European Union should do something better, much more, according to my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Is any other reflection on this? If not, oh, yes. Dr. Szczepanik.
Just a quick comment, if I may, if I may just look for the nexus between our subjects, so between the situation in the Western Balkans and the struggle for a bigger EU role in the world. I think we can look at the situation related to the vaccines. And if we look at the example of Serbia, for example, it's a country that is quite advanced in vaccinating its own citizens, but it is using mostly Chinese and Russian vaccines. So I think it is in a way a symbol of failure of the European Union of the European efforts to build European positioning in the region. Yeah. And also I think it should mobilize, the example of Serbia should mobilize the EU to double down on its efforts to assist the region in fighting against COVID. On the one hand, it's of course a humanitarian duty, but also there are other possible benefits in sight. So that's just a quick comments in which I kind of wanted to join the two subject lines.
Mirko Ziegler.
Yeah, very shortly. what we see in regional context, in this case, Western Balkans, but also elsewhere in Arab world, in Southeast China, etc., is simply a reflection of the utterly bad relations among the big powers. What we see today is the worst situation after the end of Cold War between US, China, Russia, and of course, this kind of the atmosphere among them, these big players is then reflected both in regional and local environment. In Western Balkans, just a month ago, we got this huge reaction on the non-paper about the redrawing of the national borders. We are hearing bad communication between Zagreb and Belgrade. We are, after the negative assessment of situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina by High Representative Ambassador Insko in New York, we are hearing the threats from Banja Luka about possibility of establishing their own national armed forces, etc. So when we start with this top relations, global relations, then we are, of course, not surprisingly seeing their reflection and their even amplification in some regional contexts as sui generis or a kind of a proxy reaction on the local scene.
Right, thank you. Thank you. Any other comment? If no, I would conclude our today's meeting, and many things have been said. A lot of questions tackled. Some hard questions will, no doubt, be also on the menu during the conference on the future of Europe in the coming year. Well, the year will pass very quickly, probably. We all will attentively follow the debate and may also contribute to it. Let me at the end express many thanks to our panelists, Dr. Marta Špala, Ambassador Jože Kunic, Ambassador Mirko Ziegler, and Dr. Melchior Šćepanik. And also many thanks to our host, Lukasz Jurčishin. And of course, our technical leadership, which is not appearing in as a photo, Magdalena Markiewicz. Thanks all once more. Hoping we will have another opportunity in non-COVID circumstances before conference on the future of Europe concludes. Thank you once more, and thank you for once more to our host in Brussels and Warsaw and America. I'm not sure Magdalena is whereabout in Washington. Nobody knows?
Very close to.
Okay. Thank you, and good luck. And
thank you.
See you soon.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye. Peace. Slowly.